Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of The Whole Tooth, a podcast all about sharks and the oceans, brought to you by the Save Our Seas Foundation. I'm your host, Isla Hodgson, and every episode I gather together a panel of experts in marine science and conservation to answer one of your questions about sharks, rays, and their underwater habitat. This week, I'm joined by the amazing Jill Brooks and Hannah Med from the American Shark Conservancy, who hopped on the podcast to chat to me about recreational shark fishing and sustainability. Hannah and Jill are Save Our Seas project leaders who, for the last few years, have been working with anglers in Florida to understand the impact of catch and release recreational fishing on endangered great hammerhead sharks in order to help draft better, more sustainable practices for the future. This topic was so interesting to me because, first of all, we often associate catch and release fishing with bony fish and don't talk about it in relation to sharks, even though it is a surprisingly big industry. And we talk even less about its impact on wild shark populations. So it was really fascinating to have Jill and Hannah on to teach us all about the world of catch and release fishing and how we can make it more sustainable. A lot of what they say can be applied to fisheries more broadly. One central message that I took away from this conversation is the importance of building sustainable practices from the ground up and collaborating with a variety of different groups of people, including scientists, fisheries, and anglers, to exchange knowledge and information, build trust, and really create solutions that work for everybody. That is something that Jill and Hannah have done from day one with their project, and they discuss how vital that is to ensuring the longevity of sustainable practices. As always, I will put links to our phenomenal guests and their work in the show notes, so please go and check them out. But for now, I really hope you enjoy my chat with these two wonderful women who give us a fascinating insight into the world of shark angling and how it can become more sustainable. So, without further ado, let's dive into our episode. The question that I like to kick off the podcast with is potentially quite a difficult one. I've learned this from our previous guests, that it's a really hard question to ask. But it is, what is your most memorable experience in the ocean? So, Jill, do you want to start?
Yes, sure. I've got quite a few very memorable moments, but if I had to choose one, I got to join Professor Dean Grubbs on one of his sawfish longlining surveys. And after 2 days of not seeing one, we managed to haul a line that had, I think, 6 on one single long line.
Wow.
And we basically ran out of space, ran out of power to haul the line in. And it was just sawfish after sawfish, and Dean had to swim down and unhook some of them and bring them up on a tail rope, and I was just like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget that day in the field. Pretty good.
That sounds incredible. I mean, to see 6 all at once.
I know.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was a good day.
That's so exciting. Hannah, how about you? What's your most memorable experience?
It was really hard. You're right. I think one of the most special, field work is amazing, and tagging a great hammerhead in daylight for our beach stuff was pretty insane. Especially because we finally got pictures of it, and I was like, could look back, because in the moment, obviously I'm not focused on anything but putting those darts where they need to go. I literally have no idea what's going on around me. So to go back and see it in daylight and see the pictures, it was pretty cool. But honestly, for any ocean lover, I think the quiet time in the ocean off the coast of Mozambique in about, I don't know, maybe 20 feet of water and no one else with me, just swimming along with the whale shark whose belly was scraping the sand. in this crystal clear water, and no one else was with us, and it was just me and the animal. That's something I, think about often when I'm overwhelmed with things. I'm like, okay, there are beautiful moments in the ocean, and that's actually what matters. So that's the one that stuck with me.
Oh, that's amazing. So you were on your own. So were you just snorkeling and the whale shark appeared, or did you know she was there?
Yeah, so my husband's family was running one of the dive shops up there. So we had gone up, and we were supposed to go for 2 weeks and stayed for 6, because that's
Hmm.
what you do up there. And yeah, we had just taken one of the boats out, and there weren't any tourists or anything with us. And we just happened to see her in the shallows, and no one else got in but me. So I don't know how they, I don't know why they didn't, but I just know that was, I just slipped in, and she was just belly against the sand, just swimming along. And it was stunning and quiet and peaceful. And that moment was like just for me, which
Yeah,
was lovely.
yeah, amazing. Like I think as well, like one of the most spectacular things about working in the oceans for me as well is just that feeling of solitude sometimes. So especially when you're out on field work and it's just you and the rest of the team, or just yourself, and something incredible happens, you're completely on your own, and just it's like you say, it's just really is like a almost like a gift for yourself, if that's not weird to say.
That's
Yeah, but
exactly how it felt, for sure.
the reason that I asked you both to come onto this episode and help me answer this quite, very large and complex question is because you're both part of you've both started a project which is looking at the impact of, catch and release angling on great hammerheads in Florida. So looking at, recreational fisheries and, actively trying to work towards making those fisheries more sustainable. And so can you tell me a little bit about the project and, how did the idea for this project kind of come about?
Sure. I can jump in. And Hannah, you can. um, Again, Hannah is based on the ground in Florida, where there's a lot of different user groups of the marine system there that are often in conflict with each other. And there was a lot of complaints about dead sharks washing up on the beach the morning after probably some anglers were fishing that night. A lot of complaints, and it was just, is this even legal? Can people do this? And it was like, oh yeah, this is fully legal. And it was like, wow, okay. Um, yeah, everyone's like, this is really bad for sharks. This should be banned. And then the fishermen were like, no, it's not if you do it right. Like we've been doing this for years. And um, so yeah, it was just like this brewing conservation issue, a lot of conflict between all the different user groups and the management. And as Hannah had mentioned before, there was no data on it. There was no data on who was doing it, how often it was happening, where are they fishing, what are they fishing for, how do they even do this from a beach, let alone the physiological effects of this kind of fishing on sharks. So we were like, we've got to study this. Shall we do it? Shall we go for it? And the lab that I'm with in Ottawa is very catch and release recreational fishing, looking at conservation physiology of fishing on fish, mostly freshwater fish. I was like, yeah, people do it for freshwater. Let's do this for. And Hannah's just perfectly situated and knows all the key players of all the different user groups, and it was just perfect. That's how it started. Hannah, if you want to add
No,
anything.
that's absolute. That's how I remember it. I being kind of not on my own in Florida, but I mean, and when Jill like piped up and was like, yeah, we can study this, it was like the boost of like confidence that like, yeah, no, you're right, we can actually tackle this.
Mhm.
So it was just, I think, a good combination of me being there, kind of like really knowing a lot of the people who were, talking about the issue, being, having worked with the FWC before. It's just kind of a good compliment, I think, with the two of us, and her being in that lab and having the support and, all of those people around her that knew, so much about catch and release and physiology, and even just like exactly what our methodologies should look like. And she's so connected through all of the people she knows through Bimini, Dean Grubbs, etc. It was just a really good situation we found ourselves in, and really exciting. So that's how I remember it.
Yeah, almost like a kind of like scientific match made in heaven in a way.
Yeah, and plus we're friends,
Yes.
and I think we really enjoy
Yeah.
enjoy each other and get along well, which I've been in other collaborations where it's a lot of like grinding your teeth and trying to be polite. And luckily we, I think, have a really good time working and playing together. So it's awesome.
Yeah, that always helps. That always lends a helping hand when you actually are pals with your team. I think it works really, really well. So the question that we have to answer today is, can shark fisheries become more sustainable? And they've just there's just the broad term there of shark fisheries. And I mean, you guys have mentioned recreational fisheries, but people listening at home might not necessarily know what the difference is between recreational fishing and the commercial fishing that supplies the food source for the rest of the world. So I just wondered if we could kind of talk about what the differences are between those two fisheries just before we kind of get into the meat of the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm speaking obviously from a US perspective, but in a broad sense, commercial fisheries really, like you said, is in the US especially, is a highly regulated, revenue generating activity that uses natural resources, i.e. the fish. So there's people that have permits. They're regulated by where they can go, when they can fish, what gear they can use, what size fish they can keep. And there's a lot of like record keeping that goes along with it. They have to, in order to make money and to be able to sell their fish, they have to, have all of that stuff in place. That's not the case in many parts of the world. Obviously we have the infrastructure to handle that in in North America mostly. So among, over like a global scale, there is commercial fishing can be a really big problem. Obviously, that's usually like big fleets. You think of long lining with hundreds of hooks, the impact can be incredibly large. And can be incredibly devastating, as overfishing, in a lot of parts of the world have seen, cause the decline and crash of populations of sharks. On the flip side, here in the United States, it's very highly regulated. Everything is recorded, every kind of, every shark species, not maybe to the species level for everybody, but it is very regulated. On the flip side, our recreational fisheries is just basically open to anyone who isn't going to be making money off of the endeavor. So that's anyone who will go out and, they may need a proper state license. And on the federal level, like on the national level, they do need an endorsement for their permit. So there's some permitting and things, but it's not capped in any way. So anyone with a rod and reel who wants to go out and do it for fun may need a license, but it's never capped. That total number of people who want to go out and have fun and catch a shark at maybe needs to be within a size limit. They may be slightly restricted by the gear, and they may be slightly restricted on the handling. So prohibited species may have to be thrown back, but it's just a little less regulated, and it's certainly not capped off at any kind of total number of participants.
And so, and what you mentioned there about them sort of, sometimes you have to catch, once you've captured the shark, sometimes you have to then put it back. Is that what you meant by catch and release?
It's sometimes mandated for species, but sometimes anglers don't want to eat the thing they catch. They just enjoy being outside. They just enjoy seeing the animal and the fight of bringing it in, and they release it without any legal requirement to do so. It's a type of fishing, a non-consumptive type of fishing.
Yeah. And I think what people at home might be quite new to them, or might be quite surprised about, because they might have heard about this type of fishing for, different types of bony fish, for example, whereas, it's not often talked about that much in sharks. So, people do this for sharks as well. as is the case in Florida, which is where you work. And so another thing that I kind of wanted to get a little bit of clarity on when we're thinking about this question is, it's potentially quite a difficult question, but, what do we mean when we say a fishery is unsustainable?
Ooh, it's very complex.
Yes.
But I would say on the most basic maths is you're taking too many things out of a system and those cannot be replaced fast enough. So it's just over harvesting, taking too many out. And in fisheries, it's quite difficult. It's not like logging where you can count the number of trees because you can see them. And you're like, actually, we know how fast they grow. We know how many there are. So we're going to take this amount every year because we know that can grow and can catch up and can replace itself. Whereas fisheries, it's all underwater. You can't count even any fisheries, any trout or bass or shark fisheries. Like, it's really hard just to count them. So there's a lot of maths involved and it's all very much above my head. But there's a lot of information required on kind of the species-specific life history things. So how old are they when they start having babies themselves? How many babies do they have? How many of those babies survive their first year? And how long do they live for? So how many sets of babies can they have in their lifetime? And all of those things feed into kind of population models where very clever people, way cleverer than I, can mathematically kind of assess, okay, we can look at taking this many out of that system with all those assumptions of kind of how long they're going to live for and things like that. And then, we'll take those out and then we'll see how that goes every year. And if they start declining, then we're obviously taking too much and we need to readjust how many we're catching. But it's all very complex and very species specific and site specific and gear type specific. So it's a hard question to answer. Sorry, I waffled on there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's important to note that when we're talking about sustainability, there's not very clear definitions of what it means to be sustainable, and it's also something that's incredibly hard to monitor, especially in the seas. And when we're talking about sharks, we mentioned this on a previous episode as well, in that they're extremely long-lived. They tend to be very slow to reproduce, which means that they invest a lot in very few offspring. So they tend to be quite vulnerable to exploitation. So what it means for a shark fishery to be unsustainable might be, very different to what it might mean for a commercial species of bony fish, for example. In recent years, we've become very, very aware of what the impact of commercial fishing can be on fish populations, helped along by documentaries like Seaspiracy in the last year, and just a lot more knowledge and information coming out there. But we don't often hear about recreational fisheries. Do we actually know much about what the potential impact of recreational angling is?
Well, again, from a US perspective, I think it's become much more of a focus point in research and in management. I think it was thought to be a benign sort of, zero-sum game. Basically, if you were, catching and releasing, the numbers were low. Most of the time they were releasing it under the assumption that everything lived after it got released. I think it had been sort of just not ignored, but there's a priority list, and those commercial fisheries really do have an incredible impact. So sort of down the ladder were the recreational fisheries, but it's starting to become a little bit more apparent and being a little bit more of a focus for research. Especially on the shark side. It is growing in interest in a lot of areas, and we are, through a couple of these studies that have been done so far, even catch and release might not be, the silver bullet that we were, hoping that it was. It may actually have a negative impact, and our recording of the types of, the type and effort of recreational fishing for a long time in the United States was not the most robust. So the numbers have been readjusted and reevaluated. And I mean, it's far more than anyone thought it was over the last decade. So it's clearly it's a growing sport, and we just have to be cautious about those impacts now.
And they're both linked as well. Hey, the commercial fisheries and the recreational fisheries, it's the same system they're both fishing out of, and they are managed, or kind of they are linked in management as well. So for example, a hammerhead fishery, the commercial quotas, they're set for the commercial longliners. This is how many tons of hammerhead species you can take out of this system each year. And in that kind of amount, they take out, okay, well, how many are being caught and harvested recreationally, but also how many are being caught and released, but what's the mortality rate of those releases? And that kind of piece of the pie is also considered when these very clever fisheries managers are going, okay, how many can we take? All right, this is how many we can take sustainably. We have to remember that there's some going out in the recreational harvest, there's some going out in the recreational catch and release that aren't making it. There's also some that are being caught on the commercial longline and put back because they've maxed out their quotas, they need to put them back. They're not making it either. So those still count as deaths in that original, like, this is how many we can take. So they do remove all of those, and what's left is what the commercial long line is. Okay, that's what you're allowed to take now.
Right, yeah.
They are linked, and it's
so the data, so those data are so important because it does inform, what those commercial guys are able to take. And so if it's a question mark, or if it's unsure, or if it's really underestimated, that can certainly have a big impact.
Yeah, so it's all linked together. So one informs the other. Yeah. So your project focuses on the great hammerhead. So I just wondered if we could talk a little bit about the great hammerhead as a species. So why do they come to Florida? And, what are their life strategies kind of like?
Why wouldn't they go to Florida?
Yeah, that's a better question.
Exactly. I'd like to be in Florida. I'll start, but Hannah's way more familiar with the species. But yeah, the ecosystem in Florida, it's quite diverse. There's just a lot going on. It's very I don't know the word I'm looking for.
It's like dynamic and productive. And it's like there's good prey. Our water has and obviously as like climate change and things come into play, their thermal tolerances will change. But I mean, I'm getting reports now of someone did an aerial, Jessica Pate, who is a manta researcher, does aerial surveys. She just told me today she saw 5 hammerheads on her flight. So I think their time that they're spending in Florida is actually, because they should have moved north a little bit. So I think their time here in Florida is expanding, as I think everybody's study animals, or we're going to start to see some shifts in when they spend their time and what temperatures. But yeah, it's a very productive. The Gulf Stream is a major body of water that moves right up and actually comes and flows around the UK.
Yeah, we love the Gulf Stream.
I'm sure you guys get all sorts of weird things riding that.
We do. We've had leatherback turtles, we've had sunfish before coming up on the Gulf Stream. But yeah, we love the Gulf Stream mainly because without it we'd be much colder. So
right. That's true. Yeah. So it has many benefits for everyone. Yeah. But yeah, it just causes these like really great productive areas. It's good nutrient and like, prey offspring can get spread all over the place. And yeah, it's a very productive area. There's some good stuff to eat and some like safe habitat for them. So I think that's why a lot of them hang out. And for the most part, our high season for them, we think, is driven in part by the presence of the blacktip sharks, not blacktip reef sharks, but limbatus, and different species, different parts of the world, but often get confused. They don't have that cool little black tip. It's very annoying. They're very strangely named. But they migrate down a very predictable way down into South Florida as snowbirds, as we call them, so during the colder months. during our winter. So then the hammerheads, that's a preferred prey item, we guess. And so they follow them into the shallows, and they're there in the thousands. So the hammerheads definitely capitalize on that as well during that time period.
And then the tarpon, hey, there's huge tarpon migrations in South Florida and the Keys. They're a big rec angling fish species as well. And hammerheads are there just feeding on tarpon as well.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of food for them in Florida.
Yeah, just a massive hammerhead buffet, essentially, in
Florida. Exactly.
Yeah. Amazing. And I love the term snowbirds as well.
Yes.
That's really sweet. What methods are you guys using to understand the impacts of angling on the great hammerheads?
So we are using short-term satellite tags that we put on that are kind of a pretty simple method. It doesn't feel simple when you're trying to put them on in 3-foot waves, but that's the technology itself. They're answering the question that we are asking. So basically, we put the satellite tags on the animal once it's been caught, and then once it swims off, measures the depth. So if it sits at a certain place for 3 days, that tag recognizes that as a mortality, and it'll pop off, send the message to the satellite system when we get an email, or we obsessively check the database as soon as the tag is deployed. Jill gives me 15-minute updates once the tag's gone out. And if it doesn't, which is great, is the shark swims off, and we will get those data back, and it'll basically show us the depth profile of that shark. So it swam off, and some of them drop down to some colder waters and pretty deep depths, and then do sort of typical yo-yo diving. So we're able to get about 30 days, if the tag stays on that long, 30 days worth of data that we can assess. But really, the first question we asked was, do they survive? And that tag is able to tell us that pretty clearly.
And so all of that has to happen really quickly, Isla. So during the early days of discussions on how bad this fishery is, everyone's comparing it to the commercial longliners, and how hammerheads die. They all die on hooks out on a long line, but the recreational anglers are but that's not how we do it. We release them a lot quicker. They're not on a hook for that long. We're not bringing them up to a boat and tying them up to a boat while you take blood, while you measure, while you tag them, things like that. They would argue that that's as stressful as the fishing event. So what are you really measuring here their survival of? Is it the fishing event, or is it the handling event? So to kind of remove that bias or that question mark, I've done one. I was mostly Hannah has to run into the surf and put these 2 dart tags in while the anglers are unhooking, while they're trying to wrestle this shark and trying to turn it around and trying to get it back in. We don't do anything else with the shark. We're just okay, we run in, hammer the tag in, and then let the anglers do what they would normally do. If they take pictures, they take pictures. It's just all, whatever you guys do, we're not going to interfere. We're going to really just measure the success or not success of whatever you're doing. So it's fun.
Yeah. I was just about to say it. That sounds like a pretty fun challenge for sure, to do it that quickly. I've tagged animals before, and just I know how tricky it is to kind of get it just right, especially on a shark that's moving. Because I imagine they're thrashing about quite a lot when they've been reeled into shore. Just to get this clear in my mind, so the anglers, so they're not actually out on a boat, they're actually on shore, and they're sort of hooking the hammerhead, sort of reeling it in to sort of shallower waters, I guess, and then maybe taking a picture with it, or just that action is good enough, and then they just let it go and turn it back around and send it on its way. Okay.
So they use really big bait if they're specifically targeting the hammerhead. So they'll kayak, the rod stays on land, they kayak out this big chunk of bait because they can't possibly cast it. They drop it, kayak back, and then it does sound super exciting, and it certainly is when that rod goes off, but there's an awful lot of time where you're just staring at a rod and reel not moving. So just for full transparency, there's a lot of time where there's zero action and you're just staring at the stars for a while.
So you guys then must work very closely with the anglers themselves as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just following up from what I said was we let the anglers do their thing. We couldn't fish for these animals. There's no way. No way we would know where to start. But even physically, there's no way I could reel in one of these 12-foot hammerheads into the beach. So yeah, originally we were like, we need the anglers to be able to do this, and then the more we sat with the anglers, we're like, we also need the anglers for the whole conservation issue. Like, we need them to be on board. We need to listen to them. I mean, that's a whole other angle of research, is understanding the human dimensions of it as well. And I won't go too much into that, but Hannah especially, again, because she's just on the beach with them every night. A huge network of anglers that are really very supportive of the research. They love it. They love talking about science with us. And they're all very passionate about that shark making it. And there's obviously a few bad eggs, kind of, I think, get a lot of the attention. But yeah, the majority of anglers are pro conservation, because they know they want to do this for the rest of their life. Like, it has to be there in 10 years for them to fish for them.
And I would say too, there's some bad eggs, but there's also just I think they fall into the two categories. Some that are just like, listen, I've done this my whole life, this is how I'm going to do it, which seem very few in my opinion. And then the other is this learning curve. It's got to be a really very high profile undertaking. Was like, especially the hammerheads, like during a season, it became something that was, a really got a lot of attention on social media. And I think a lot of people tried to get into the game without knowing very much. So there's just sort of a naive starting point. And that's where I think we've seen, we also are working with the FWC to kind of be in charge of when say a dead hammerhead washes up on shore. There's not really a protocol in place. So we're building that protocol. Right. And we've been able to match up sometimes when there's posts about, someone young or hasn't, it happened this year, somebody posted a picture of themselves in the area with a hammerhead using very light gear, zero experience, things like that. And then I got a call the next day that there was a dead hammerhead, and I could tell from the rig that was still, the hook that was still there, like this was a shore-based fishing event. So I think that's also, I think probably the biggest impact is the people who just don't really know all the, that learning curve. We're trying to flatten that. Yeah. Trying to get them to the point where, they have all that really good inside information really early on, so that we can, avoid that.
That's brilliant, because that's something that I was going to ask you guys about, but we've kind of come to it naturally, is how important it is to work along, not just engage, but work alongside the people that are operating within the fisheries, and that are doing the angling. And I think it's so important to actually work with them and sort of understand the mechanisms behind it, so that and then gain that trust as well, which is a very hard thing to do, because I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I actually work in the human dimensions aspect. And one thing that I find really difficult is, perceptions of you as a scientist, and, coming in as an outsider. Is that something that you guys have also experienced, or?
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, yeah. You can imagine recreational fishing is a pretty male-dominated field as a sport. And then as you go higher up the food chain, I think it just gets more masculine, more macho, and then us two wandering down the beach. Hi. It's been very interesting. I mean, I'm really proud of what we've achieved and how much trust we've gained. Being invited to their stupid Denny's 3 a.m. ritual of eating spaghetti bolognese if they catch a hammerhead. That's, you can't not do that, because then you won't get a hammerhead next time. Like, so we join them on that awful tradition. But as someone, a wise person once told me, if your user group, if your collaborators ever invite you for a meal, you go. You go and you break bread, you have a drink with them, you eat with them, and you chat with them, and you start gaining that trust. And Hannah especially, I'm up here in Canada, just in the Facebook group chats, just like chiming in every now and then, but Hannah is there getting all the texts. She's definitely within that, a lot of that network now. But it was hard, and we don't look like anglers, so yeah, people are skeptical, and I guess we're young, so people are always like, "Oh, are you able to do this? Are you qualified to do this?" And it's been frustrating, but we've done it. We've got there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I will also add in, not only from the science or from the angler side, I think we were probably met with a bit of amusement, like, wait, you girls want to do what now? So yeah, getting in, working with the anglers, there's a lot of, I buzzword again, but like knowledge exchange. Like, I talk about things from the science side, they talk about their experiences and the gear that they use. There was just a ton of that. And then as well, policy and management and academia, like all of that was all involved, and we've had to navigate it. But again, also super proud of being able to do it while, I think, producing a pretty good project that we hope will continue for a little while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'd said it before, but I'll say it again. It's so important to, work with people. I think that's such a huge aspect of conservation, that people don't necessarily realize is, a lot of interacting with humans, really, and sort of working with humans. And you mentioned it before, sort of like kind of changing it from the inside. And that's really sometimes the way that we can really make a difference. So I just wondered if are you guys able to, share any of what you've found with the project, or, with the tagging data, or when you're talking to anglers?
Yeah, so there's two kind of halves to the project. Like you said, we've got the human dimensions side and we've got the biological side. I can just quickly talk about our human dimensions study, and then Hannah can jump in and talk about the tagging, as she's done the majority of the tagging. But yeah, our human dimensions, the first paper's in review right now, so I can talk about it. But yeah, we sent out a survey as we were, again, designing the biological study and getting talking with the anglers. We're like, hang on, there's a whole side of this that we don't understand, and some very good friends of mine are social scientists, and just chatting with them, they're like, yeah, you need to start asking these kind of questions. So yeah, we did a survey to all the permit holders in Florida, and I'm just gonna round everything up, but basically we got about 1,000 shore-based shark fishing anglers that actively target sharks from shore responding to our survey, which was awesome. And then so putting kind of all the demographics into R and having it all spit out in a cluster analysis, there's kind of 3 types of angler. There's obviously some overlap, but there's the super experienced and have been doing it for a long time, and they do it often. There's the less experienced, they're relatively new to the fishery, and do it often, they're trying. And then there's somewhere in the middle of kind of experienced, they just don't do it that often. They don't do it that much anymore. But through that survey, we asked, okay, how many sharks have you caught in the last year? How many bulls? How many lemons? How many hammerheads? How many tigers? And I think I would have to just pull this up. Almost 10,000 sharks were caught by our respondents in 1 year. So if you kind of extrapolate that up to the full permit holder list, which is about 18,000 anglers, It's around 130,000 sharks caught in 1 year in Florida from the beaches. So
Wow.
it's a huge, I mean, it's back of the envelope, like rounding up, but it's a decent amount of sharks caught compared to the commercial fishery.
Yeah, wow, that's definitely much more than I would have
Then
thought
you,
anyway.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I know it's frightening, and the amount of money they spend, it's in the tens of millions of dollars. So it's a huge input to the Florida economy. And there's like I'm not. It's a huge paper. I'm not going to go through it all because it's super interesting. But from the presentations we've given at conferences and talked to the fisheries managers, they're like, wow, okay, this is a thing that we really need to take note of. So that's been good. And then using that survey, we looked at, okay, if you've caught hammerhead, a great hammerhead, can you then redirect them down a different survey track and say, okay, what gear type did you use? Where were you? Did it survive? How long did it take you? Like all of these kind of most fishing specific questions, we've asked those, which will help us guide our tagging study, because we've kind of realized the gear types that our anglers are using are on the high end, as far as rod and reel combinations. They're pretty strong gear. But the people that have reported catching a great hammerhead in that survey, that's a really small portion of people that use that gear. So we need to start branching out now and using lighter gear. But I'll flip it to Hannah, who's got the data on the actual tagging study.
Yeah, and that's the gear, just, in case people don't know, when we're talking about the gear, like a heavier gear means like a stronger rod and a bigger reel, thicker line, bigger hook. So just like a real beefy setup. And what that can do is get the animal, from the time it bites that hook, it gets the animal, typically gets it to shore. So its whole like experience being fished is a lot shorter, which is, a lot less traumatic and can, mean that the stress hormones don't spike, causing like all sorts of issues downstream. So if you're using what we consider light gear, that would be, a thinner, longer rod, lighter line, and a smaller reel, because the anglers get very angry with me because I keep asking them to explain how the reels work, and it's been 3 years and I should know better, but it's actually much more complicated. There's drag and there's gears and there's this whole, there's a whole physics behind it. And I did not do super great in physics in undergrad. But anyway, so just for like an overall, like that bigger reel, the smaller stuff, it might take the fight time from hook to landing can be longer. So that just is much more time for for the shark to get, really worked up. Stress hormones go through the roof, and their overall physiological, or their fitness declines. So, in a lot of studies, like these guys were sending the sharks back into the water thinking everything was fine. And this is, when people were like, don't you just love hammerheads? I'm like, actually, I mean, they're cool, but it's so annoying that they're these like big, apex predators, but like they stress out and they don't handle it well. Like some people don't handle stressful situations as well as others. They're just in that category. So they'll swim off. These anglers are like, see you later. That was successful. And downstream a day, 48 hours later, the animal actually ends up dying, but they looked fine swimming off, based on, just observation. And that's why our tags are so important as well. But yeah, we affix those tags on anything that's caught, by anglers themselves. We don't do any of the fishing, as Jill said, they perform their fishing activity or exactly how they would, and we put those tags on, and we've put out 16 so far. And we don't quite have our data published yet. But I can definitely say that a surprisingly few have not made it. We have a very high survival rate based on the tags that we put out. And the social side was so important, as Jill said, is because then we were able to recognize, maybe the driver of that was the gear and the experience of the anglers we mostly worked with. So we wouldn't just be like, oh, yay, throw a party. Everybody can fish for hammerheads. They're fine. It comes with a very serious caveat that like, we wouldn't have known if we didn't go down the social science route and be able to like really understand what most people are fishing with. We were actually, unbeknownst to us, fishing with the most elite, group with the most experience, with the heaviest gear. So that helps us interpret those results, which is then also, again, helpful for managers because maybe gear really does have a big part to play, which can be a management action.
Awesome. Yeah, there's two really cool things that I took from what you just said. And the first one is, obviously the value of having these kind of interdisciplinary projects where you, on the one hand, you've got the sort of biological or, the technical data, but on the other hand, you've got the sort of social science data, and you can put them together to sort of put the whole story together and almost put the jigsaw together. And the other one is the idea of hammerheads as these kind of very quick to stress out characters. Because I always thought of them as being these sort of like really sort of chilled dudes that just hang out in tropical waters, but no, they're quite anxious apparently. Although I guess I would be as well if I'd just been reeled into shore. We kind of circle back to sort of the overall question, what lessons have you guys learned from this project that we could, maybe apply to sort of making fisheries in general more sustainable?
I would say just the growth and the sort of thing that struck me was really the importance of the human aspect of it. I think I'm so used to looking at projects, the tagging stuff that we did, obviously with Bimini and Steve Kessel, like it was very focused on, where did these animals go? And it was very focused on environmental drivers. I think that it's been a big eye opener for me, and I feel very happy which were all good questions, but I was always anxious to have some, if I'm going to do it, I want it to be applied to something which, research can be, but this was from the get-go, we knew exactly, and I think we knew exactly that it needed to be applied to state and federal levels. So the human dimension of it and considering them as a factor and as a source of information, and it's been that really, this project has driven that home for me. I think it's probably a lot of people already know that. There's people in fisheries management that know that, but coming from sort of the research and academic side to this project, I think it's been, the takeaway is that it really, having respect for the people involved in the activity, getting their input. I work with a lot of different stakeholder groups. A lot with the dive industry as well. Very, very different groups, obviously, but I noticed that it applies to both. So I think that was my big takeaway. And I think there's definitely people within the fisheries, they already know that, probably, but that was the big takeaway for me, is that it is a very important part of this, of co-producing the stuff that's, going to make the impact that I hope it will.
Yeah. And just to kind of follow up on that, obviously understanding the human dimensions is important, but as Hannah said, co-producing, that's a kind of a new word in my research field. Is we reached out to FWC, we reached out to the shark scientist at NOAA, the manager at NOAA HMS up in Washington DC. We were like, okay, what do you need to answer this question? What data do you need? And we've had guidance from the start from the people that are actually going to use the data. And then we've gone to the anglers and how do we even do this? How do you fish for this? So we've had their input into the project design, and they've told us what probably wouldn't work, because we've been designing this at a desk. We've not been out in the field with them. So there's a lot of people that have contributed from the beginning, the project design. We haven't gone in as biologists, parachuted in, got this question, got the data, and then gone, okay, who needs this data? And kind of spread it out that way. We've come at it a different angle and gone, this is what data do you need? Can we work together to get it? And then you have it, and then and as far as the anglers, they collected that data. It's not made up. We've not fabricated these data that shows angling's bad. They've been there to collect the data. They have extra trust in it. Like they know they helped collect the data. So there's that buy-in as well. So any new regulation change, like the anglers will be like, yeah, actually we did see that if you did A, then B would happen. But if you did C, then D would happen. So we can see why they've made those rules. So you get a bit more like on board kind of support for new regulations, things like that. So long story short, there's the understanding the humans, but also like working with the humans as well to kind of solve the problem has been key for us.
Yeah.
One last thing too is that yes, independent nonprofits can produce very valuable research. That's something that we've not to leave that aspect out. And I don't know if it's super appropriate on this platform, but I just think that a lot of people, everyone was like, well, what university? Oh, are you with NOAA? Are you with this agency? No. And I think that's a big takeaway too, is that very valuable data can come from independent nonprofits, research groups, whatever, that can really support, FWCs. Like we don't have the bandwidth to do this. NOAA is our federal agency. So they just move, things move a little slower and funds are a little bit less available. And, so yeah, I do want to make that little plug too, is that, we wait for these studies to come out. And I think you can actually rely on groups like ours to help move that along.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's that famous saying, it takes a village. And I think when we're talking about things like sustainability, there's all these different levels and all these different dimensions to it. So, we've talked a lot about, the social science side today and the sort of human dimensions aspect. But we've also talked about, the kind of getting the scientific data and getting social science is also science, but you know what I mean? So like the biological data and the geographical data as well. And then kind of combining that all together and informing policy in that way is kind of like a view of the bigger picture. So I guess when we're talking about, making shark fisheries more sustainable, we need to look at all of these different dimensions.
Absolutely.
And understand them and, use all the expertise available to do that. It's a big question and a very, very big undertaking, but I think we've done a pretty good job of, going through all of those different areas, in the space of the podcast. And I could honestly talk to you two all day. But I'm fully aware that you guys have things to do. But I've just got a couple more quick questions just to finish us off. So my first one would be, what is next for you guys?
Well, we've got a few grant proposals in. Fingers and toes are crossed for sure, because we'd really like to expand. There obviously, as you get into these questions, like you just realize there are more questions.
Yeah.
So expanding, to boat-based things, to different species, and even just boosting our sample size for the hammerheads would be amazing. And we have so much support from other big organizations, from NOAA, from FW, from the agencies that need it. So we're full steam ahead on that as well. And we've just, growing ASC is American Shark Conservancy is a major mission, and it's happening every day, so it keeps me super busy. But yeah, I'm just super proud of our interns, our research assistants, our collaborators. Jill has been amazing. So yeah, that's just keep us going, keep us contributing where it's needed is the main goal for the next foreseeable future.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and Jill, how about you?
Well, just adding on to Hannah's, like expanding our sample size. The great hammerhead, the hammerhead complex in the fisheries, in commercial fisheries in the US, they haven't got a good idea of the stock size, so that original population that you can take from and understand all the kind of the math between what's sustainable or not. They haven't assessed that yet. And that's this year and next year's job for NOAA. They're like, okay, we're going to look at hammerheads and try and figure out how many there are, how many are dying, and all of these things. So they've reached out to us and like, okay, now we need your data because now is the time we're discussing this. So we're really hoping to expand on the sample because it is hard to catch a critically endangered species from a beach at night with anglers. We've put a lot of nights on that beach. So that's kind of, the next step is just to get more funding, to get more tags, to get a better idea of what's going on. And hopefully I'll be allowed to travel soon and I can go and help Hannah in the field in Florida.
Yeah, we'll finally have a doctor amongst us. So when Jill successfully defends, and we'll finally have Dr. Brooks that'll quiet all the people who are like, "But you don't have a PhD. How is this possible?" So I can just be like, "I know it's Dr. Brooks. It's fine."
That is so exciting. I mean, I must say when I got mine, every time someone said Dr. Hodgson, I was like, "Ooh!" Like you never quite get used to it. So yeah, you've got that to look forward to.
Thank you.
But no, definitely. I mean, hopefully you can go and eat your spaghetti bolognese again at 3 a.m. Such a random choice.
I know,
but fair enough, fair dues. But yes, fingers crossed for those proposals because the work that you're doing is just so incredibly valuable, and yeah, there's definitely so much further that it can go. So yeah, fingers crossed for all of that. And if people are, if people are interested in finding out, more about your work, where can they go to find out about it?
Well, we have a website, which is just AmericanSharkConservancy.org. So we're pretty active on social media as well. So Instagram is ASC_shark studies. And then Facebook, American Shark Conservancy. Honestly, if you just Google it, you can find all of our social media and digital presence just by American Shark Conservancy. So that's probably the easiest.
Awesome. Yeah, and there'll be links to everything in the show notes as well. So links to how you can find out about their work as well. And my final question is one of my favorites, which is, if you could be any species of shark, what would you be and why?
I mean, I'm going to be super cheesy. Just the thought of not having to worry about anything but orcas. I'm going to go white shark. I know I hate saying that, but it sounds too easy. But just to cruise around and like, they just don't have anything to worry about. And that's a life goal. So I'm going to say white shark.
I mean, they're pretty badass. I'm not going to lie. I don't think that's a bad answer at all. I mean, apart from the obvious orca issue,
we'll ignore that part. But...
just stay away from false bait.
Exactly.
Jill, how about you?
And I think I would also have to be cheesy and go lemon shark. Just one, because of the snowbird angle. I like those warm temperatures in the winter, and they do that too. They like to migrate south. But also on a super cheesy angle of, I know they return to Bimini every 1 to 2 years to hang out, so that would be pretty cool. A pretty cool routine cycle to do every 2 years. Pop in and say hi to everyone. So I would, lemon sharks, and they're my favorites. So.
Yeah. Oh, both super good answers. My whatever species I would be changes every week, so yeah, it would just be cool to be a shark in general, I think. But thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast. It's been absolutely fantastic to talk to you, and like I said, I could talk to you literally all day.
Same.
Thank you for making it very easy and chatty. I appreciate that a lot. Sometimes it can be a little stressful, but no, this was my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yes, same. Thank you.
No, I'm glad to hear that it wasn't stressful, and I didn't induce a stress response like the Angles did in Great Hammerheads.
And I hate to admit it, but I think I'm actually like a great hammerhead. That's why they enjoy me, is because I do stress pretty easily. So I'm pretty sure this was a very successful catch.
Yeah. Yeah, I must say, I think we can all see a bit of ourselves in the great hammerheads. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of our conversation with the amazing Hannah and Jill from the American Shark Conservancy. I honestly could have talked to these ladies all day. I think their project is super interesting and important. And, you know, the topic of sustainability and fisheries is one that is so multifaceted and has so many different avenues that we could go down. You know, we'll definitely be touching on it in future episodes. But for now, I just want to say a massive thank you to Hannah and Jill for coming on the podcast and chatting to me about their awesome work, and also, you know, giving us an insight, a deep dive into the world of sustainability and shark angling. So thank you guys so much for that. As always, like I said, I will put links to everything in the show notes, so you'll be able to find Hannah and Jill and find links to their work. So please go and check that out. If you like this episode, I hope you did, please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one, and leave us a nice little review on iTunes. This just helps more people to find the podcast. And if you'd like a question answered on the podcast, or just want to say hi, please feel free to get in touch by emailing isla@saveourseas.com. You can also find out more about Save Our Seas by going to saveourseas.com. And a big thank you to David Knight, who provided our wonderful jingle. All right, that's it for now. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.